but we were driving around here, and Alan Cross came on the radio. We were listening to CFNY, and I remember him saying, I hate to have to say this. I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, but Kurt Cobain has been found dead in the apartment above the garage in Seattle, and I can see it. I can see the dashboard, and it was so, I was 14 years old, and I didn't know him.
The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
Oh my God, I'm delighted to be here. Marissa, congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh my God, as I live and breathe, Marissa Stapley. Listen, the book is a delight. We have a lot to talk about, but I want to start with you talking about this very building we're in, because you were just telling me that you used to be here all the time.
I did. So I went to my last year of high school just at Bathurst and Finch, and this is where I would come to do serious actual homework because I was trying to get into journalism school. So, and yeah, just so many memories. And I had kind of a downtime in my life when I was in university and things weren't so great, and I came back here and I renewed my library card and just suddenly was like, oh, everything's actually going to be okay. Like, I have a library card now, and I can get whatever books I want. And so it's a meaningful place, and I love it. It's so beautiful now.
I like that we're both just saying nice things about libraries because they're having us. It's not just that. I'm married to a librarian, so I have to say that, you know? To be like, I really love libraries. She's not even listening. She's not even here right now, but
She might be.
But she knows. Somebody tells her when I say the nice thing about libraries. Look, this book is about a lot of things. It's about fandom. It's about heartbreak. It's about devotion. It's about the cost of making yourself vulnerable and how that sometimes can cost you way too much. But it begins with this where were you moment. It happens to Hen, sweet Hen. We're not going to get to Hen just yet. I don't want to get into Elijah yet. I don't want to get into Jane just yet. I don't want to get into Hen just yet. I want to wait. I want to stay with this idea of the where were you moment, because we meet this person, Hen, and she's listening to the radio. And the DJ on the radio is talking about, where were you? Where were you when this person died? And I was listening to, as I was sort of reading that description, I was like, Marissa's had a few where were you moments. What were the where were you moments that stick out for you in terms of, remembering exactly where you were when you heard that this icon had died? What were the ones that stick out in mind for you?
So that came right out of my teenage years. I was in the car with my mom, actually around here. I was still living in Stouffville, which is where I'm from, which makes it into the book. But we were driving around here, and Alan Cross came on the radio. We were listening to CFNY, and I remember him saying, I hate to have to say this. I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, but Kurt Cobain has been found dead in the apartment above the garage in Seattle, and I can see it. I can see the dashboard, and it was so, I was 14 years old, and I didn't know him, but I felt like, he'd been circling the drain for weeks. My friends and I somehow knew in a pre-internet era everything that was happening in the overdose in Rome, and it felt like it was happening to me. And I think that where were you moment, that it's right that the book begins there, because I felt like a character in his story, even though I didn't know him, had never met him, and that is Hen, right? That super fan, and how you are part of your idol's story in your own mind, but what if you really could be?
Yeah, I think there's something about the where were you moment that sort of freezes you in time, right? Like you sort of keep returning to that self. Like there's a sensitivity to the idea of remembering where you were, and this does not necessarily apply just to the grunge era and the relationship that you might have with Kurt Cobain. People sort of talk about that relationship with John Lennon. People talk about that relationship with a lot of different idols when they heard. I think the most recent, most commonly referred to one that I hear now is like Michael Jackson, for example, But there's something that freezes you in time there. And what I really loved about the book is how you took me to a different era of fandom, because fandom operated differently in 1999, I think, than it does now. We have different rules for how fandom operates now. I don't think fandom now would recognize fandom then. What made fandom, innocent is not the word, but maybe a bit more all-consuming in a different way in 1999? How was fandom different, you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I've been given a lot of opportunity to think about the difference between now and the 90s. Trying to explain it to my teenage kids is like talking about a different planet. They're just like, why would you use I don't understand a payphone. But I think it maybe was more innocent because we didn't have access. The access was different. So maybe we were just as hungry for everything, but you were waiting for the magazines to come out. You were listening to the radio and getting context on everything too. So I think there was that. And now it is so not innocent because people have completely forgotten that these are human beings. And maybe we didn't know that then. I mean, perhaps I didn't think of Kurt Cobain as an actual human being, and possibly the way Courtney Love was treated, if there was the internet, she would just be absolutely bullied in the comments. But you see it, and you see people dehumanized, and it's not great. I don't like it, and I think about it all the time. I don't like it.
No, I completely agree with you. So we sort of take that moment and that scene, and we go and we meet Hen and we meet Jane, and we don't quite meet Elijah, but what he sort of looms over the book. What, for what it's worth, the song that made Jane and Elijah famous is a song that has My Life or Yours, that has a 38-second introduction. And I was like, what has a 38-second introduction? What's Marissa referring to? And it Smells Like Teen Spirit, Marissa. That is the song. Because I think Smells Like Teen Spirit has something like a 34, 35-second intro. Yeah. Am I wrong? Am I right about this?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
I believe Cannonball has a long introduction too, and that pause, right? That Rob Harville talks about. There's a pause, and they're like, you can have a pause on the radio. Yeah. So I was thinking about that song too. But that was the thing about grunge and alternative. They were like, oh, really? Like, we can't do this, and they were just doing it, and everyone loved it. Yeah. I actually talked with Alan Cross a lot when I was researching the book, and he told me what it was like to play Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time on CFNY, and he said he had one of those demo CDs that the record companies give out, and he, I guess the segment producer or whoever was like, hey, there's this, play track 4 at some point in your show, and he was like, okay. So he put it on, and then by the time the song was over, the lines were jammed, everybody was calling. This was, I think he said it was Monday, the album dropped on Tuesday, he did Club Energy on Friday, which you may remember if you're of a certain age. He said everyone knew the words by Friday. He'd never seen anything like it. So that's that. But it was a different kind of song. Like it did have that long intro. The lyrics made no sense. Mostly. Mostly,
yeah. But there's something about, as we sort of like hear, and you had to write the lyrics, "Do My Life or Yours," in that spirit, right? You sort of have to channel, like, what would a timeless song sort of sound like? A song that everybody remembers where they were when they first heard it. Everybody has that relationship with it. You didn't just write a novel. You wrote some songs, pal. What was that like?
Okay, well, I went into my old teenage angsty journals, and I found a lot of poetry. I was very emo. And I realized, so I started trying to write it, right, because I knew I needed the lyrics to use them just throughout the book. And then I would think, okay, I need to figure out how to write this song, and did not work. I'm a 45-year-old woman. I don't have a lot of angst anymore. Or I do, but it's about
I don't believe
the
you,
price
but okay,
of broccoli or something. So I was looking at these poems, and I thought, these are pretty good. And I feel that still. I know who that was about or what that was about. So I drew from my teenage poetry. And I think I do get a lot of compliments on the lyrics, and I think teenage Marissa would be like, well, yes, I was quite a very good poet, thank you.
Did you write music to it?
I can hear My Life or Yours. I will sing it karaoke one night, but I'm not going to sing it now.
That's exactly the answer I was hoping for, by the way.
One day, I'll be like, here's a little song I wrote. It's sort of like a more rock version of Just Like You Said It Would Be by Sinead O'Connor. It's that kind of thing. It's like that.
And you sure you don't want to sing it right now?
Not right now.
I have some notes on that personally, but all right. I want to talk about Jane. Maybe as a way of sort of meeting these characters. I think let's meet Jane. Jane is guarded. Jane is wounded. Jane sort of immediately evokes I think like the idea of Courtney Love, or at least the emotional space that Courtney Love occupies, because one of the first things that we learn about Jane is in the world grieving Elijah's death, she was like, this doesn't belong to you. And that felt familiar. That felt like a space that we're like, I know who went through that, because I remember someone like Courtney Love saying, he didn't belong to you. And the fans turning on her for that reason. You have this sort of phrase where you talk about Jane viewing the word bitch as a tattoo, the idea that you just sort of like became attached to her in some way. Who is Jane? Tell us about Jane's sort of wounds as she moves through this book.
So Jane, she is Courtney Love. She is Sinead O'Connor. She's got the genius of PJ Harvey. She's all of these women together, because actually it's interesting, we think that about Courtney Love, but in those first moments she was so generous. She was in bed snuggled up to Kurt's mom, recording a message on an audio tape, crying, and all they ever play is that she was like, she called him an asshole, but like everything else, I mean, she was broken, and she was sharing that, and she went out to the vigil. So she tried, right? I think she tried to share, and Jane, I realized, would not do that. Like Jane was just like, nope, he's mine, he's gone, he's mine, and that was it, right? And everyone was just like, oh, really? So they are different. You'll find when you start writing fiction, you often do pick someone who you're modeling your character after, and they just completely become a real person.
Yeah, they take over.
And they take over. So Jane became very closed, and so Courtney they're very different. Courtney wanted so much, right? She wanted, and she was so open about it, whereas Jane was just like, all I want is Elijah, and then she would tell him what she wanted, but it was all very private. So she's kind of a combination, but I think she is what everyone thought that Courtney was doing, and the words that people put in the mouths of so many female stars in particular back in the 90s.
Well, one of the ways that we sort of get to the title, Lightning Bottles, is you sort of have this description of he was a lightning and she was a bottle. The idea of they sort of needed each other. And it's like this really beautiful and imperfect love that gets volatile at times, gets like, I'm worried about the two of you at times. Elijah is like hot, but not in a way that you'd want to introduce him to anybody, like you kind of go like, just like, yikes, but also he's got it, Do you want to talk about crafting the love between the two of them? Because at times I was like, I think I'm worried about these two, but at other times I was like, no, they need each other.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. That was what I would say. Like, Elijah is not actually the hero. He's on this journey. He's the guy you definitely should not have dated. Like, really cute, but like, and I fell for that every time too, so I could really feel that, like, oh, but I can fix him. Yes, that is exactly, and he's so charming, right? But he doesn't even really try, and he's so broken, and it's just such a bad idea. So yeah, like that is, you nailed it. What was the question though? Because I'm distracted by the fact that you like just get it. Yeah.
We love a I can fix him book, That's what a time that is. No, I was asking you to describe sort of the love between the two of them, because at no point do you go, I'm not rooting for the two of them,
So, I mean, I love the idea of kismet and soulmates. I believe that people can be meant to be, and so I think they have that. There's that soul connection, and then they love each other on that, kind of teenage hormonal level. Plus, they have this incredible art thing happening, which would be amazing. And then
the complementarity between the two of them.
Yeah.
He sings these songs in ways that nobody else can. She writes these songs for him that are like, that's the thing he's meant to be singing. you know?
Yes, and I think that becomes so important because later, Hen is kind of interrogating Jane and saying what everyone else has said. Like, you're obviously, like, you never wrote another song. Like, explain yourself. And then she's like, well, imagine writing songs for Elijah Hart, like, for that voice. And then he's gone. Like, well, of course I was never going to write another song. Like, they needed each other. One did not work with the other, and that was so important to the story for so many reasons. And I loved writing that and just beginning from the teenage years, but also sending them on a journey where maybe Elijah could maybe become the guy that you'd be like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we're seeking redemption for Elijah in a way, and it's been 5 years since he's been gone, but can we still find that redemption for him? I want to talk about Hen because you said something about you believing in Kismet. And I think you do something really risky in the prologue. In the prologue, look, I don't know if you guys have this relationship with books. I think sometimes some people do, where they open a book and go, that's a crazy coincidence, I'm mad. And some people will open a book and go, I believe in coincidences, let's go. And the coincidence here is you have Hen, who's living in Germany. And she's not just living in Germany, she's not living in Berlin. She's living in like a smaller town that's just outside of Berlin. And she has idolized the lightning bottles for her entire life. And at the end of the prologue, she's mourning 5 years since the passage of Elijah Harper. And she looks out the window, and Jane is there, moving next door. You took a risk. You took a risk in being like, sometimes crazy things happen. This is like what sets off the relationship between Hen and Jane. It's not like Hen ran into her at a concert somewhere. No, Jane came to Hen.
So there were drafts where that did not happen, and the editors would be like, "We got to get this right out of the gate." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, she's got to find her and convince her." And then something actually happened to me right before Lucky was supposed to come out, because I do have weird things happen and weird coincidences.
Are you like a woo-woo person?
I'm a little bit. I
Let's go.
woo-woo-ish.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to make this a succinct story. I was literally like sitting on my couch. I did two things. I sent the edits for Lucky off. I rented a cottage for the summer, filled out the application, hit send on those things, and then went for a walk. There is a dog in Lucky named Betty, a shepherd husky, and I was a little bit obsessed with just getting the look of this dog, and I'd been worrying about it because I just added the dog. So I walk out my front door, and there's a woman across the street walking a shepherd husky. So I do what any normal person would do, and I run across the street, and I explain to her that I'm an author, and I'm writing a book, and there's a shepherd husky, and could I take a picture of her dog just to, like, make sure that when I'm doing the edits, I've got the description right. And she said, of course, and his name is Hershey, and he was a very beautiful dog. He came from the north, like he had a story. And then she said, what's your book called? And I said, it's called Lucky. And she said, oh my gosh, my name, Laima, it means lucky in Latvian. And okay, cool, that's cool. I was like, that's so cool. And then she went on my Facebook page and liked me, and it was all nice. And I was like, isn't that neat? Went back inside, and about, let's say 2 hours later, I get a message from her on Facebook saying, you're not gonna believe this. I just was talking to our cottage rental agency, and you have rented our cottage for the summer. And I was like, oh my God. So, and I honestly kept waiting for something amazing to happen nothing happened. Like, we rented the cottage, we had a good time, and nothing amazing happened. But then I thought, the amazing gift that experience gave me is, like, sometimes crazy things happen. And they just do. And Jane, it's like, by the way, sometimes, like, crazy things happen and there's no plan. Like, she doesn't believe it. And maybe there is no plan, but I believe that these things. So, like, why couldn't Jane, they were one of the most famous bands in the world. So, but I struggled with that prologue, and I was so worried, and I live in fear of someone. And there are a few, I try not to go on Goodreads, who are like, nope, couldn't do it.
Don't go on
Too much of
Goodreads,
a coincidence. And I'm like, well, you're a loss. There is magic in this world. Deal with it.
I think, listen, if you're not into the big magic of it, then get a hobby. Be open to nice things happening. No, because, like, that immediately pulled me in. Like, the idea of, I've just spent 4 pages with Hen at this point, and then suddenly she's shaken to her core. I'm immediately sort of thrown into her world. But also, her world is not just this small town. Like, her world is 1999 Germany. So it's 10 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Her mom is still living sort of with the ghost of the wall. She's a bit of a shut-in. She's still thinking a lot about that environment that she grew up in. It's also December of 1999, so we're hurtling towards Y2K. There's a lot of sort of liminality that Hen is kind of occupying. Why did you choose to set it? Like, I think, like, to me, it felt like you were really invested in this, like, it's kind of a risky, undefinable time period.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, my kids are like, Y2K. They're 16, 17, and it's the whole moment. They think it's so cool. Like, did you really think the world was going to end? And it's all, so I kind of like the idea of just having that looming, like, because Y2K it was really weird. I remember just really, we thought something was going to happen, like Fight Club, right? Just nothing happened. And then it was really tricky because I needed Elijah to be, I don't want to, like, the timeline needed to be reasonable for, like, how long he had been gone. But then sometimes, I mean, you sort of go off on these tangents. So when I started researching, I just thought street art Berlin, that would be cool. I'll just do this. And then I created this character, and then I read Stasiland. I was reading everything I could get my hands on, and I realized we saw, the wall came down. That was great. Everything was fine. No problem. But the East Germans were absolutely messed up. It would be like your mom being like, you can't open the door because there's monsters and it's very scary and terrible things will happen.
Spies,
and then forever. And then one day just being like, oh, actually, no, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Just open the door. And some people had very, very serious mental health issues because of that. And so Hen's mom became who she was, basically an agoraphobe, which really makes sense. And I had to do that because otherwise it just, putting it there didn't make, like, the setting just didn't make sense.
What's Hen's relationship to this sort of liminality, do you think? Like, the idea, because she sort of, everything for Hen sort of feels a little bit on the precipice when we meet her. She's like, I gotta get out of this town. And I've realized that we've spoken this whole time, but I haven't really told you guys the plot. I should do that a little bit. Which is that, like, when Hen meets Jane, Hen is like, actually, I'm convinced that Elijah's alive, and he's been trying to send you messages using graffiti art. And Jane's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And, like, that's kind of where we begin. And so talk to me about setting, like the forces sort of hurtling Hen out of where she lives.
So I think I've become more and more woo-woo over the years, because when you start writing, you do kind of just follow this subconscious path. And so the connection, it's so important where Hen is, because there's this direct connection to Jane as a teenager in Stouffville waiting for her life to begin. And yet the circumstances are so vastly different. Like, Jane, lives in Stouffville and Hen lives in a little East German town. But it was just, those connections became so clear and important, and it just happened. It just flowed out, and it really just worked. And that's one of the, you're onto something when that starts happening. It's flowing, and you're like, oh, that works, and that's why that's there.
I want to talk about healing, if you will, because I think as you read this book, I feel like I'm in conversation with teenage you, trying to talk to these people, trying to talk to some of your heroes in moments when they felt like they needed you. And there's something really beautiful about that relationship, being like, I think it could have gotten to you. I think it could have helped. And the disappearance of Elijah at the start of the book, because his body was never found, and the story, the drowning, sort of resembles a lot the Jeff Buckley drowning, right? Like, the story of sort of having this generational talent who puts out one album that we really have, and then what do we have but sort of like remnants here and there of this guy, and like an unbelievable voice, one of the greatest voices of all time. Talk to me about how Jeff Buckley sort of got woven into this book for you.
Yeah, I came to Jeff Buckley, I had kind of heard of him, but it was more post 90s, post.
Okay.
So when I discovered Jeff Buckley, in the same moment, the person who was playing the song was like, yeah, but he drowned. And I was like, what? No.
Oh, no.
Like I was like, no. I was trying to like figure, I was like, that must be a mistake, can't be true. So in that moment, that beautiful voice, and then I lost him, and then didn't know a ton about him, so did research. But the story of Jeff Buckley just like kissed his friend, like a beautiful platonic kiss. They were listening to music. And then he was just like, I'm just gonna like float off down the river. And it was weirdly magical and so sad. And and I have a teenage son too, right? It was such a dumb boy thing to do. Like, and I just, you think about that, you're like, if I could just 5 minutes and this wouldn't have happened. So there is that. There's another, like, I think also what you're hearing, that whole, like, I could get to you. I was writing the book thinking to myself, I was a huge Sinead O'Connor super fan. Like grade 7, my friend Michelle, who couldn't be here tonight, who lives around here, we went to see her at the CNE grandstand. My grandfather drove us, like waited outside. And I loved her. I dreamed about her. I thought maybe we could be friends. So when I started writing the novel, her memoir had come out, that documentary had come out, and the depths of what had been done to her was clear. And I would think, well, if you read this, like, I'm going to give a happy ending. People are going to treat this Jane differently. Like, I would say to my husband, like, we'll find a way to get it to Sinead, and maybe it'll just make her feel better, a little bit better. And then she passed away halfway through the writing of it, and I was so, didn't happen to me again, but I was like, this feels like it's happening to me. So there is that, like, I want to get to you. I want to make things better for you.
The whole subway ride here, I was listening to Sinead, and as I was just sort of thinking about this ending, which I was so mad at you for how much you made me cry reading the ending on the subway. I was just furious with you, but also in a way that I was like, the way you've written those conversations, and the way that you've written, like, you were feeling like the spirit of you in conversation with these people, has healed a lot of questions that I think people might have. Like, for example, there's all these questions about, like, how much did Jane really write the songs? Because, you know, it's really like we're hearing Elijah who's delivering the music, and in that I sort of hear, you know, you in conversation with all the accusations of, like, how Kurt wrote all the whole songs, and how people sort of dismiss Courtney Love, and they never really seem to mention, like, the way that John Lennon sort of insisted on crediting Yoko with Imagine. You know, it just kind of felt like you were trying to heal those fractures in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a songwriter myself.
Hell yeah, you are.
I know now from, I spoke with songwriters, I read books about it, and I realize now, like, you and I could sit down and write a song together, but, like, I could go perform it and make it my song, or you could go perform it and make it your song. Even if Kurt and Courtney were writing songs together, he's not like, here's a song, done, just go do whatever. Or like Billy Corgan. That's not how it works. And those songs were obviously her songs, and oh gosh, it drives me crazy. Like I said a couple times on the TV appearances, it drives me nuts when people say, Eddie Vedder's the last man standing of grunge and alternative. I'm like, no, he's not. I mean, Courtney Love is definitely the last man standing. She behaved like such a rock star, but also there are so many left, and that the lack of credit, I just, so yes, I was trying to heal that because I also would get very angry, and that's not always, productive.
No, but there's something transformative about taking that anger and putting it into a story and saying, you know what, we can remedy this, or here's what it looks like in a world that recognizes the pain of this person while also not robbing them of their authorship. It's not lost on me that we're talking on a night when PJ Harvey's in town, by the way.
I know. Somebody came up to me at an event last night and was like, I have a really important question for you. What should I wear to the beach? I'm dating a guy and I don't, I was, oh my gosh, I was like, okay, listen, you can wear whatever you want. She like reinvents herself with every album, but like, it was so great. But I was like, yeah. So anyway, she's here. This is good though.
No, I'm no PJ Harvey. You know what I mean? I think she's also playing tomorrow. So just saying.
Karaoke.
there are other plans. I want to talk about Khalil Gibran for a moment. Khalil Gibran, the prophet, book shows up a bunch of ways and a bunch of times. Talk to me about the poetry of Khalil Gibran and how it worked its way into this book.
So my parents, who remained very close but divorced when I was very young, there was Khalil Gibran read at their wedding. I feel like you're getting married in the 70s, that was happening for sure. So we had that book on our shelf, and I would read it and think I thought it was quite, I really loved it. I mean, it's beautiful. If you haven't, a few people have said to me, like, I looked that up, and that's wonderful poetry and very deep and meaningful. But when I started just researching or getting lines to use, I noted that Khalil Gibran's poetry was often looked down upon for how commercial and accessible it was. This is a real pet peeve of mine. I really don't like it when people think that because something is accessible, that means it's easy or it's not important. So it became really important to me to put this in the book because it's just it's a little pet issue. Nathaniel Hawthorne said, easy reading is damn hard writing, and I think that's so true. And to be able to distill the human experience into a few lines, it's not like he just was like, oh, that's cute, I'm gonna, put that on a page.
In fact, it's a much harder reach, right? It's a much harder reach because you're trying to, not necessarily trying to, but I think like the thing that you do is you end up encompassing a lot of people or bringing a lot of people into that tent. I'm going to come to you guys for questions in a couple of minutes, so we're going to get there. But before we get there, let me return to Sinead, because we've seen, I think, a wave of reconsiderations of the way that we treated certain stars, particularly 90s stars, particularly 90s women. I think that is sort of an ongoing wave. I think Sinead was one of the harshest examples that we've sort of gone through because it sort of seemed to arrive kind of instantly at everybody. It was like, oh, we messed up. We really messed up with the way that this woman was completely written out of public life for so many years. When you talk to me about how that felt, sort of living through that, like what are your lasting memories of interacting with that story?
I feel awful because I was a self-professed super fan, and then, I sort of just was like, oh, I guess she hasn't put out like a good album in a while, and just sort of forgot about it and became a very self-absorbed teenager, not worrying. Plus, there was no internet, so I didn't know what was going on. So I had no idea. I mean, I knew the Saturday Night Live thing, but I really didn't know until close to when her memoir came out, because I was starting to do research for the book, and I was like, oh, I felt like I know I couldn't, apparently I think I can do things like have Sinead read my book and have fixed it, but I was like, I didn't even pay attention, and we really did mess that up because rock stars particularly, do some really, and have done some pretty gross things, like Led Zeppelin.
You don't say.
Yeah, I mean, I know, shock, right? But particularly statutory rape seems to be a real favorite, and there's
Led Zeppelin is like, I mean, like they were having sex with like 14-year-olds on tour,
on
right?
tour.
Like this is recorded in magazines
all the time, and everyone's just like, oh yeah, huh. So she ripped up a picture of the Pope, and it was like, maybe not well thought through, but she had passion in doing it, and also she'd been abused by her mother, and she was trying to stand up for abused children. So she wasn't actually trying to abuse children, and she was verbally abused the next day by the host Joe Pesci on Saturday Night Live. She was abused to the point where she retreated to Ireland. I mean, she was
begged
booed,
for mercy,
begged for
right?
mercy in an open letter. And I could not believe it. And I couldn't believe that someone I cared about so much in this fan way had this happen almost on my watch. Like, we really messed that up because she did not deserve it. But it happens over and over. Like, I keep saying too, this is an unpopular opinion. I know that everybody got super mad at Blake Lively a couple weeks ago, and she may not be the nicest woman in the world, but why does it matter? Like, why does she have to be nice, and why do we do this to women? We're like, we're gonna just get you, and we don't do that to men. Dave Grohl is going to be like, next year he'll be carrying his baby in a sling, and everyone will be like, look at that cute baby, what a guy, right? Like, that's what we do, and I think we need to stop.
The Dave Grohl story is an interesting contrast because for those of you who have not heard, Dave Grohl announced that he's having a baby that is outside his marriage. That's how he put it. I think there are other ways to put it personally, but the reaction to it has been like, I think like some younger fans have been like, wow, I don't know about this. He's kind of like crafted like this like rock dad image. But for the most part, that's kind of been like it. Like there's no real meaningful backlash to that guy.
And
right?
it's fine. Like I don't listen. Things happen. Life is complicated, so I don't think there are
Especially
worse
rock
things to
stars,
do. Yeah, but I just think if it were a woman, like if it were a woman, it would be so different. And if a woman were pretending to be everybody's mom and then was having a secret affair, it would just what would happen, and the comment sections would be very different. Then everyone would be like, "Cool, Dave, keep on rocking. Like, I love your long hair." Just.
Well, I will say, watching the Jane's Addiction reaction, because Perry Farrell, again, we're just catching up on them. Rock gossip over here. But you might have seen the videos of Jane's Addiction lead singer Perry Farrell was getting in a fight on stage with some of his band members, and then they canceled the rest of the tour. They were supposed to be in Toronto last week.
On the same night as my book launch.
On the well, how about that for kismet, hey? But again, like the reaction wasn't like, we should ruin this man's life. I was like, get him help.
Get him help. I hope you get the help you need.
Which, like, get him help, absolutely. But also, you can kind of imagine that grace would not be
Courtney
extended.
Love punched Kathleen Hanna, and we still
did.
talk about it. That was like 35 years ago.
Yeah, exactly right. We don't extend the same kind of.
I feel like she was, I think she was mad about what it was. She was
having a feeling though,
She
right?
was
Like
yeah. I mean, she shouldn't have done that. No one should punch anyone. But yeah, it was. Everyone was like, "Ugh, she's just toxic," and yeah.
You're just saying that
Perry needs help. Perry, by the way, don't even get me started because he needs.
I would like to get you started. That's what we're doing here.
Well, I interacted with his ex-girlfriend, Casey Nickley, who was like the 5th Jane's Addiction member, who was like she directed their videos and was the 3rd member in the threesome on the cover of Ritual to a Low Habitual, and the woman on the cover of Nothing Shocking, made into Siamese twins. All of these things completely erased from the band's history. A couple of months ago, that paper mache sculpture resurfaced, which was of a very intimate moment.
Yeah.
And Perry was like, "Hey, let's all go and take pictures of us staring at this." And kept talking about how he had a threesome. We're like, we get it. Good for you. But she had been told that it was lost. She had been told, and this is a piece of and she wrote an article in Huffington Post saying, like, watching these men staring at my ruined face and naked body, that I had created this, and remembering how Perry just erased me from the band's history. And I knew who Casey Nickley was in a pre-internet world, and that is saying something. So we're gonna meet when I go to LA next month. But then Jane's Addiction just exploded and imploded. So
Is she gonna play Jane in the adaptation of this book? Is that what's gonna happen?
Well, sure, but I mean, she's like the Jane in the future. She is, yeah. She was so cool. So, but she's yet another. Like her article started like, "I am not the girlfriend. I am not the muse. I am the artist." Like I was an artist, and I was there. But why these women were there, and we don't talk about it.
When you set out to write this book, were you thinking about it as a corrective? Was that sort of a part of the mission, or do you sort of start with story and say, "No, I got some things to address here"?
Yeah, I think I didn't think about it that way, and I really just wanted to write a 90s music, kind of like, I loved Daisy Jones and the Six. I felt very wildly jealous. I've always wanted to write. I don't get jealous usually. I'm like, good for you, but I was like, and I've close colleagues with Taylor, so I was like, oh, damn, I wish I wrote that, and she was like, well, do it, do something. But I think it became that when I started delving into the 90s, and it was upsetting to realize that had been happening, because I didn't fully realize it at the time. But then when I started, I would be like, Mel, I'm going to find a playlist to listen to while I write. So I'd be like, top grunge, whatever. And it was like Alice in Chains and Stone Temple, but guys, like maybe the Breeders. And I was like, this isn't right. This is not what was happening in my bedroom.
No.
Like, no. So, yeah.
I think you have an ending that's going to make a lot of people weep. I think you have an ending that is going to surprise a lot of people. Talk to me about, was this always going to be the ending of the story, or did you have other ones in mind and you're like, no, I couldn't do that to them?
No, I knew. The characters came to me about 6 years ago before Lucky, and they were all like, "Oh, that's I'm going to tell you everything." And I had memoir. I was writing my way around the story, so I did not start actually writing the novel until I knew and I saw them there. Like I could have pulled a John Irving and like written that last chapter first. I didn't because I was like, "Oh, I'll be jinxing myself. Something bad will happen if I do that." But yeah.
It's a spectacular ending. It's an ending that I'm like, how I feel healed. I feel a little bit healed and really grateful to have lived it.